Hello everybody, welcome back. It is me, your old pal Orpheus, with another adventure here on Orpheus Plays. Although again, it's another episode of the Madness and Mayhem podcast. Strap on the headphones, lean back, relax, and listen to me as I tell you about something that has been affecting my life since at least I was 8 years old, and that is bipolar disorder. Now, this is going to be another of those episodes where I kind of go into a mental health sort of region. This is going to be on my mental health playlist, as well as the one with my podcasts. And the reason is this is going to deal with something that's obviously mental health related. And so what I want to do before we get started, before we do anything here, I want to tell you my general disclaimer when I talk about psychological stuff. And it is this. I am not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I am not a therapist or a counselor or a social worker, anything that has any sort of degree in that sort of area, okay? Anything that I say is to be taken with a grain of salt. It is, your mileage may vary, okay? But what I have is a lifetime of experience dealing with these mental conditions and disorders. And so what I like to do is just kind of share my experience of how I deal with those things, how I've dealt with those things, and hopefully it's something that resonates with you. Now, I do not want you to take anything that I say as a way to diagnose yourself or someone else. Don't use this information, look at someone else's behavior or at your own and say, well, Orpheus experiences this, so I must have it too. If you feel that way, go and talk to someone who is a professional. Pay them money in order to go and get some help. If you don't have the money, there are free and very low cost resources available. A quick search on anything will give you a list of very affordable and or free options. You can even do them via text sometimes. So just go out there and find those resources if you need them. And with all that being said, let's get to the topic. Okay. So, as I said in the intro, I want to talk about today something that has been, it's been a major effector in my life for a very long time, and I'll get into that in a second, and that is bipolar disorder. Now, if you're not aware, bipolar disorder is a mental disorder condition in the DSM-5 that is, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't have the DSM in front of me, I'm not going to bring it up or anything, but the basic idea is it is a condition where you swing from one emotional state to the other, specifically something called mania, and the other thing, which everyone's heard, called depression. Now, what happens with this disorder and why it's not, just a normal set of circumstances is there's a baseline that people have. Okay, so if there's a line across the middle of the screen, I'm not going to put it up because I'm not going to do any graphics for this. If you put a line across the middle of the screen horizontally, okay, and then kind of draw a little bit of a, like a wave up and down just a little bit, just kind of wave it back and forth. That would be what you call the baseline, or if we want to go there, normal mental state. Okay, so going up a little bit is you getting a little bit more energy and feeling boosted and you have ideas flowing a mile a minute, and then you dip down a little bit and you have a little bit of today sucks, it's Monday, the sky's gray, I got an F on my exam, whatever it is, right? Well, that's the normal baseline. People just kind of dip in and out of those things, and otherwise just have they just have a day, like it's not how's your day, oh my god, it's the best thing ever, and you do that for 2 weeks straight, and then how's your day? Oh my god, I can't do anything, life sucks, oh geez. That if you spend that way for 2 weeks, if you do that on a constant basis, you probably have bipolar disorder. Okay, now the problem with that is it is extremely disruptive to your everyday life, as you can imagine. So now take that horizontal line across the middle of the screen and take your finger and draw, go up and down like a seismograph going off. And that's kind of what happens. You dip into these depressions that last weeks at a time. You go slamming up into a mania phase that can, again, last for weeks at a time. And the extreme nature of each of those that your mind allows you to explore during those extended times, well, it does a few different things to you and to the way that you take up your time every day. All right, so what happens is when a quote-unquote normal person is having a good day or a bad day, they'll go into work and they're like, people are like, how you doing? And you're like, I'm having a great day. I'm feeling good. I got up on the right side of the bed this morning, feeling good, had a good breakfast. I made all the traffic lights on the way into work and everything, having a good day, right? And you just kind of like la, 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 and you go through your day and you're feeling good. Nothing really bothers you all that much. You kind of let things slide, or maybe you got something coming up that you're looking forward to, right? Let's say you're going on a cruise in 2 weeks, and so you're having a good day because you just got the email confirmation that morning about the cruise and all the itinerary and everything, and so you go into work and you're like, yep, great day, okay? If you're having a bad day, let's say a friend of yours passes away or something like that, you go into work and people are like, how you doing? And you're like, well, I just kind of feeling a little down, like there's some things going on in life, not feeling great. And you just kind of roll with that. And you go through your day, you're doing your work, but at the same time, there's just a little gray cloud kind of hanging over you a little bit. And you're like, maybe I'll go home, have a beer, smoke a joint or whatever, and just kind of chill out. And, I'll light some candles, think about the good times. And, by the next morning, you're back to your normal self. You may not be, oh my God, I'm having a great day, but you're probably a little better. And then as, the days go on, you kind of back up to baseline, right? Okay, that's a normal day for someone who is quote unquote normal. Well, the behavior that gets structured throughout the day for someone with bipolar disorder means that if you're having a good day, it's not just a good day. It's an exceptional day. It is the best day ever, and it goes on for days and days and days. So you go in there and you're having a great day as someone with bipolar disorder, but that doesn't mean that you're just happy and fluffy and, everything's good, right? Let's say you're an accountant. Okay, let's choose something boring and just, basic. And you're sitting there and you're doing your job, you're crunching numbers and you're doing everything. When you're normal, that turns into just a normal thing. You're just clacking away on your keyboard, right? When you're manic, in a manic phase as a bipolar disorder person, that becomes like you finish all your work for the entire day in about an hour and a half, and then you sit there and you're like, oh my gosh, I should design a new way for the company to, do their input for sales and traffic and blah, 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 and you start trying to code that, and you're like, well, maybe, I should go over and do this real quick. I need to call someone and make sure that my car gets taken care of. Blah, blah, blah. You do that, and then you go over and you're like, I really need to go get some lunch, but I don't know. Where do I want to go? And you spend 20 minutes doing that, and then you call your friends because you have these real great plans for after work, and and so like you just kind of flow from one hyper state to the next. And what goes along with that is you kind of feel like you don't need to sleep. You don't need to eat a whole lot. If you do, oh my gosh, you go and you binge like you do a mukbang, but you do it just for yourself. At a Burger King or something, you'll just wolf down a bunch of stuff real quick and then on to the next thing. And you just feel so productive and so awake and so aware and so charged up. Your thoughts are going a mile a minute and everything. And oh my gosh, look, I can do 10 times the work of anyone else. But when you go back and you look at all of that quote unquote work that you did, okay, I've kind of slowed it down because that's kind of normal again. All right. When you go back and you look at what you just did for that day to, well, it's got to be more than a day, like, days to weeks, all that time that you thought you were amazingly productive, all that time that you spent, doing hyper networking and coding and all that stuff, you go back and you look and it's all pretty much garbage, right? I've gotten into manic states before, and I've produced a lot of content and a lot of like craft projects and stuff like that. And, some of it's good. Okay. Some of it's really good. but most of it is pretty much garbage. And it's because I just, you want to do things, you want to get things done. And instead of worrying about the actual outcome being perfect, unless you're someone who's OCD, and if you get OCD and bipolar at the same time, oh, maron, I hope you get some help. But you go back and you're so like focused on finishing things that you don't really focus very much on finishing them correctly. And so part of what, I'll give you a tangible example. I was doing music, just creating music on this channel 4 months ago or whatever it was. And I was in a little bit of a manic stage at that point. I just kind of let myself go with it. It wasn't a full manic stage because, well, we'll get to that in a little bit. But it was something where I was just kind of drifting in and out of like a hyper state for some of it. And when I released to you guys the music that you guys see on my channel that I produced during that little burst, that's about 60% of what I actually, about 60% of what I actually produced for that. And the reason is that the other stuff that I came out with that I thought was brilliant, like in the height of those like kind of phases, and I had all these ideas floating out, and I was just cranking out these songs, and suddenly I'm like, wow, these are really not good. Like what sounded good in my head and the beat that I had in my head and all this stuff that I put together that I heard, because one of the things that happens when I do that with music is I will hear the entire song. I'll hear everything in my head of what I want the song to sound like, and then I'll go to various places and I'll create the assets and put them together. Well, normally when I do that, it's okay, right? But a good chunk of what that was during a little bit of a manic phase, and so the music's kind of garbage. And when I was unchecked, pretty much over the years in terms of medication and therapy, I wasn't on in any sort of program. I used to have a Korg wave station and a lot of DJ tools and things like that, and I would sit and endlessly do that stuff as well. And then I would go back again and listen to the tapes and listen to the stuff that I did, and I'm like, wow, this is really garbage, right? And when you're unchecked in terms of no therapy, no medication, things get a little weird, and that's when you really put out that garbage, right? You're not checking yourself very hard. You're just again, you're focused on getting all that taken care of. And it can be kind of damaging because you go and you brush up against other people in that manic phase, and you just kind of, I don't know, they're almost like furniture. You know what I mean? Like you see, like the funny example is someone real frantic, and they'll be holding a stack of papers, and the person next to them who's quote unquote normal and just kind of observing this person humming at a way higher frequency. So they'll, the person that's going nuts, and the person that's watching it says, hey, is there anything that I can do? And the person thinks for a second, and they go, yeah, hold my paperwork, or or sit down there real quick and like hold this stuff for me, or point to this real quick. And you just kind of, you're very brisk with them, like very brief, like you just kind of you would half ignore that, you look past them, I guess is the best way, because you see them as maybe an asset if they can help you finish your thing, right? But the problem is they're probably not at the same frequency in terms of like hyper productive nature, that they're going to kind of see what you're doing as weird, and so they might avoid you a little bit, or get the idea that you're too intense, right? You're too much for them, and so they might avoid you. You can also kind of have a little bit of verbal diarrhea going on in a manic phase, which means you just you lose your filter between your brain and your mouth. And so over the years, I have absolutely lost promotions, friends, debates. When I was a professional debater, not professional, but I was like regional and national debate champion back in school, and like situations like that, or even what the hell? What the? No, thank you. What the? my smart home heard me say something. Anyway, real life right there. So you can see them as a hyper asset, but the problem is they're not at the same speed as you, and so you can kind of dismiss them for not being at the same speed as you, and so you just kind of see them as pointless. You also burn a lot of your energy. It can burn out your immune system and stuff like that. It's almost like taking ecstasy. If you've ever taken ecstasy, I have not, thankfully. If you have, don't. It's no good. But what it does is it kind of squeezes the good feeling parts of your brain, the parts of your brain that release chemicals that make you feel good, right? That make you feel loving and happy and open and free. And that's kind of what happens in that manic phase. But just like ecstasy, it squeezes that portion of your brain so much in such an intense burst that you spend a lot of time afterwards in a crash, right? Well, when you're on ecstasy, the crash is, you literally spend a few days after, a rave or whatever you took it for, or for fun or whatever dumb reason. When you took it, you spend like 3-4 days coming down, but it's not really coming down. You just feel like nothing's important, right? Like you just, right? Everything is just kind of gray, right? The color just drained out of everything. And it's because you have to build that serotonin back up in your brain in order to get, feeling quote unquote normal again. Well, if you're bipolar, you spend days or weeks in that manic phase, just constantly squeezing that serotonin and those endorphins. You just keep going and you keep chasing more and more. And so when you get to the end of your manic phase and you've spent all that time just hyperactive, right? Just doing everything, blah, 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 talking a mile a minute and running around and, I have a new way to catch mice, and I'm going to, spend 8 hours bending wires and stuff. Yeah, I've done that. But that's what it is. But then you come to the inevitable crash. Now, that's where the problem starts to really set in if you're someone who has bipolar. Now, here's why. You go to sleep one night after you've spent 2 weeks as the most productive human being that you've ever been, well, since the last time you had your manic episode, and you you go to sleep and, I got a lot done today. And let's go. Right? And you go off to sleep and you wake up the next morning and suddenly it's not just a gray tinge to everything anymore. It is now, why do I not want to get out of bed? Why do I feel just absolutely drained, right? I've spent 2 weeks going to sleep and hardly needing any sleep and waking up and bouncing out of bed. And the first thing I'm going to do is go out into my living room and vacuum everything, So you wake up that next morning and everything isn't just gray, it's dark. The cloud over your head that was a little tiny gray cloud before is now a full-on thunderstorm following you everywhere you go to tinge everything that you do with a crap, like sepia tone. And what it does, it drains everything away from you that you love. If you're someone that suffers with depression, if it's something that colors your life as well, you'll know that depression is a thing that it really takes over everything as well. Instead of being hyper-productive, you become non-productive almost. You don't clean the house. You don't change your clothes or wash them. You don't want to even bathe, right? You don't get anything done at work because you go into work and it's, how's your day? And you're like, and you just kind of ignore everybody and plod over to your desk and sit down and, you're still that accountant, but now you realize that choosing an accountant's life was the most horrible thing that you've ever done. And now you have zero prospects and everything is going to suck. And you just have to work this dumb job until you're 60 anyway. And then you're probably going to get fired because a newer person or maybe the AI will take over. And I don't know, and so you spend your day doing almost nothing in terms of work. That can affect your work performance severely, because if you're someone that just dips into depression, like an quote unquote normal person, and I'm not going to keep saying quote unquote, if you're a normal person and you can just dip into depression a little bit because most of it's situational, right? Something happens and you feel depressed about it. But someone who suffers from heavy depression or bipolar depression, it's just because, right? You just feel that way. Everything's tainted. You don't do anything at all with yourself because you just don't see the point. Okay. Now, one of the worst things about it, that happens to me when I get into these real deep funks, and the last time it happened to me was about 6 months ago. I had to go on some extra medication for a little bit in order to bump myself out of it. But I have a lot of things. Mrs. Orpheus and I have a lot of things in this house. We do like the nesting syndrome, right? So we have a lot of cool stuff everywhere. We have people that come over to our house and they're like, this is the coolest house I've ever been in my life. Because we just have, a bunch of cool things all over the place. Collectibles and, like Xbox and PCs and, retro consoles and all sorts of stuff. D&D and, everything. Every sort of distraction that you can imagine. Things that, that are amazing any time of the day, things that are amazing if the power goes out, to take with you camping, or, whatever. We have a lot of what you'd call cool stuff, right? And normally every day is kind of fun. I'll wake up, I'll do some housework because yes, I'm a house husband. I'm very proud of that. I support my wife 100%, but I do my, little chores around the house, and then maybe I'll play some GTA online. I'll come over to my computer and play a little Kerbal Space Program. Maybe I'll record an episode, play a little Blade and Sorcery, do a little bit more housework, go wash the clothes, stuff like that. And then by the time my wife gets home, I'm like, hey honey, how's everything going? Right? And that's a normal day. But when you have depression, like when I get into my worst depressions, none of that means anything, right? So instead of I'm playing GTA Online for fun, or World of Warcraft for fun, right? Because you just kind of want to dick around in the world, right? Like in GTA Online, I have all the toys, right? And I just kind of like to fly around on my douche cycle, the oppressor. I like to fly around on my douche cycle and blow people up and, whee! Or in World of Warcraft, I'm designing I'm just moving shit around in my house, in the housing. I'm putting plants where I want them and stuff like that. But when it was in the deep funk of depression, it's like that gets reframed, right? It gets turned into, why should I even give a shit about going on a game and just doing something, right? What's the point, right? Why do I want to go in World of Warcraft and design a fake house when I just don't care about anything right now in my life, right? Why should I do any of that stuff? And there's always the possibility that you'll go further and want to, you start thinking about self-harm. And if you're someone that experiences those thoughts, please go get some help. Talk to anybody at that point. Don't talk to necessarily a paid professional. Talk to somebody, your friends, your family members, your coworkers, someone. Talk to someone and get some help if you feel like hurting yourself or someone else, okay? If you're in school, talk to a teacher that you trust, okay? Something like that. But just, but that can push a little further. But mostly what goes on with these deep depressive episodes, at least for me, is everything it doesn't matter anymore, right? It's like, well, let's eat something healthy tonight. Well, I mean, what's the fucking point, right? We're microplastics and there's crap in the air and over-processed foods and, the healthcare and industry sucks and, right? Everything just turns into this like the dial gets clicked to another setting. Nothing matters. You don't care. Now, you've heard about most of this already in terms of, depressed people experiences. But what makes it especially bad for someone with severe bipolar, is that you go from that highest height that you've ever felt. Like, imagine something, the most fun that you've ever had in your life, from any time period in your life. So maybe it's going to Disney World and you got to hug Mickey Mouse and oh my God, you felt the most amazing that you've ever felt in your entire life, right? Take that. And then have it be you go to sleep at Disney World that night at the hotel and you wake up the next morning and you just do not give a shit about life. you just don't care anymore. You go from feeling amazing to feeling the worst you ever have in history. And you stay like that for days, for weeks. For me, the last bad episode was like 6 months, right? It was absolutely awful because nothing mattered. I just stood in my kitchen and like not even watching stuff on YouTube or anything mattered anymore. I normally, I spend my day watching YouTube as well when I'm not gaming, or when I am gaming. I've got YouTube up and I'm learning stuff and I'm getting entertained from things and I'm laughing and smiling and that's my normal day. But when I was in that depression, it was like, what do I even do? Like I just listened to a bunch of shitty music and like everything I watched on YouTube was just like me blank stare at it. No reactions, just, and then I would connect with things in the video. Like if I'm watching a body cam video and someone has some sort of mental health thing, I'm like, well, that I know exactly what that's like. And unfortunately, right. And like, it just adds to everything that's the nonsense. And like I said, I had to go on a little extra medication, a little bump of medication with my therapist just to get out of that. So here's the part where we talk about why it is something that has shaped my life so specifically and done so many things to me specifically that it finally became so amazing when I figured it all out. Okay. Now, in order to start this story properly, I have to go back to when I was about 8 years old. It was a little younger than that. We'll go about seven and a half. I was a quote-unquote normal child, except I was an exceptional child, according to all the tests and all the letters and stuff that I found over the years. Exceptional child, right? I had, spatial thinking skills and reasoning, and comprehension and everything that was absolutely incredible for someone that was a 7-year-old or something like that. I also was very sick at that point in my life. And that is a topic I think I've covered that in another episode. If I haven't, I'm going to go back and find out. My mom, she was poisoning me, so I was sick a lot, and so I was dealing with that, but I was still, even in the depths of being absolutely sick, like in my bed, just barfing up everything that I would eat or drink into a basket for like days at a time. Even in the midst of that, I was still pretty good spirits, right? Still like reading books and like enjoying life and everything as much as I could, and everything was kind of cool. Until I got my first head injury. I was always a little disruptive as well. I mean, that comes with the territory of apparently being intelligent. You're a little bit disruptive sometimes. And so there was that, but there was nothing really terrible. But then I got my first head injury. I've covered this in a lot of other episodes. Brief overview. I was on recess, running around the side of a building at the school. I tripped over a tree root, flew through the air, and smashed my left temple on the corner of a brick on the building that was the gym. Unconscious for, I don't know, several minutes at least. I had to go to the hospital. Never got any actual brain scans done. They just checked that if the skull was fractured, and I had an injury that got within millimeters of puncturing my brain in the temple area. The temple area is especially susceptible. It's kind of thinner. And so tons of stitches, everything like that. And everything seemed sort of okay, except for a few months later, I started to hear music and I started to be kind of violent towards people. I was horribly disruptive in class. I was violent. Like I would push kids off of things in the recess area, like out in the playground. Like they'd be up on a high, platform. Look, recess was a lot different when I was a kid. We had a lot of dangerous stuff out there. Like we didn't have the rubber padded foam insert things on the ground and like a mandated maximum height for how high the jungle gym or something. Like the jungle gym, if I think about it, like I was like 4'6" or something back in middle school or something like that, or back in elementary school, and it like we could get 6 kids on each other's shoulders to get up to the top of the jungle gym, right? Or it was that big, like a dome thing made out of metal, monkey bars, whatever they called that. Like it was 20 feet from the top of that to the ground like that. It was bad, right? But like, so everything was a little bit more, like you were able to injure yourself easier. And so I would push kids off of stuff and then kind of observe what would happen, see who'd come running over and what kind of response and stuff. And I would like mentally manipulate my friends and the adults, and like I'd just start lying to everybody. But the thing was, I also developed deep depressive episodes and then total hyperactive episodes, horrible hyperactive episodes, to the point where they thought, and they kind of verified, I mean, it's just a jumble of things. How do you know, right? If someone that has heavy manic episodes is hyperactive and it's, the early 80s, what do you do? Right? What do you chalk that up as? Well, at that point, they didn't really have like the terms that were the same or the diagnoses that were exactly the same as they are now in the DSM-5. Okay, the diagnostic services, isn't that what it's called? The DSM-5, the psychological manual for diagnoses, these days is a lot different than it was back when I had these issues begin, right? And so I got labeled with a bunch of things that were, you wouldn't call them very PC these days. One of them being social psychopathy. I had sociopathy, things like that. They don't really call someone they don't really label someone as being a social psychopathy sort of person, right? They don't label you as social psychopathy anymore because that means you're a sociopath, and they don't like using that term anymore. So they didn't really do that, but they also didn't really have everything refined as much back when this happened for me. And so I was amongst the first grouping of people in the United States that were identified as having ADD or ADHD. And so there was a lot of medications at that point that they were trying, and I was on, first I was on Ritalin at first, and I had to go during my school day to the school nurse at a certain point and get my half pill out of a little tiny manila envelope of my Ritalin, and then I go back to class. But Ritalin made it worse for me. It had a paradoxical effect, I think, or whatever it was. It made me more hyper because Ritalin is essentially crack. It goes into the certain part of your brain that is not activated correctly to control you, I think is how it works. And the Ritalin activates or excites that area, right? So it's kind of strange that that's what they do, but they didn't really work for me. So they put me on Silert at one point. That seemed okay. But the thing was, it seems like sometimes it helps, and then sometimes he's just not motivated. And so the thing that they chased after for a long time was the lack of motivation. Now, I know I glossed over the I hear music thing. That's been a thing since I was 8. It's a good basis for a lot of the content on my channel. Go learn about it if you're curious. It's also on my mental health playlist here and there, and sprinkled throughout all of my content. It's something that affects me all the time. Anyway, so I got to it's hard to diagnose properly when someone goes from, complete manic episodes that at the time they thought was severe ADD or ADHD, and then swing down into these depressive episodes that they thought were just what's going on with Orpheus's motivation, right? And they chased that so hard. Like, what is the motivation? Why does he have no motivation? Oh, doc, tell me, why does my son have no motivation? And that was a thing that even after I was first diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I think that was when I was around 13, 14, it took years. And even after that, my parents still, my father especially, chased the idea of you just don't have motivation. You're just lazy. What's going on? Why aren't you motivated to do anything a lot of the time? Well, because I have a depressive leaning bipolar disorder. But what that has done to me over the years, it has made me impulsive. Okay? It has made me miss things that would have colored my life in an entirely different way. And we're not going to go into like the path that you're supposed to take in life, okay? I covered that in a recent episode where I talk about my faith and how I found my faith. And it was because of the realization of the synchronicity in my life, the combination of factors that came together for something that was absolutely unavoidable and unequivocally true, that made me believe. And again, you can go listen to that podcast. It's a few episodes ago, where I talk about how fundamentally amazing that was. And we're not going to say that, you're going to change the path that you're supposed to be on, because that's not how it goes. But there are so many things that would have gone differently in my life if I had that under control. Impulsivity is one, and since we're talking specific things in my life that it has affected, I went in one day. I was a sophomore in high school, and I had skipped a lot of school, as was something that was very regular for me up until I graduated. I skipped a lot of school, and then when that didn't work, I just got smarter about it. So I'd put a choir class next to 2 study halls, like that. And so my choir teacher was cool, would let me skip, so that stuff. But I was skipping on a pretty regular basis. We had a truant officer or a truant administrator, the dean of the school, whatever it was. And my name was on a list to go talk to him that morning about excessive tardiness and or absences. And so I saw that. I was having my breakfast in the commons area down underneath the school where the cafeteria and all that stuff was. And I'm just kind of sitting there, and I was like, I don't feel like going to talk to him. As a matter of fact, I don't feel like going to school today. As a matter of fact, I don't really feel like going to school for a few days. So fuck this, right? And I got in my car, and I had a Shell credit card, Shell gas station credit card that my parents had with me for, obviously gassing up. And I had a credit card. No, I didn't have anything else. I just had some cash. And so I jumped in my GMC Jimmy, and I drove down to Florida because I wanted to go to Disney World. So it was just one day, and I decided, fuck it, I'm just going to get in my car and drive down to Disney World. And so, it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and I spent a day and a half driving down to Disney World, just chunking the card everywhere I went to gas up and get stuff to eat and everything. The cash I had with me, I was going to use to buy a ticket to go to Disney and just spend a couple days going to Disney World and just kind of messing around. And I didn't think about the rest of it. I didn't care, right? I was just like, how am I going to get back? What are my parents going to think? Fuck it. I don't care. None of that matters. I'm going, right? And it wasn't even that I processed it mentally that much. It was just like going to Disney, right? And I think I even told a few people I'm going to Disney World. And of course, I was in Michigan at the time, so it's not like I was just like a couple hours away from Disney World. It was a good 23 hour drive or something like that. And so I told my friends, I'm going to Disney. And of course, what's the response? Just absolute like, yeah, whatever, dude, right? So I drove down to Disney, and the problem was my Jimmy at that point had a little defect in the cooling system. They used the wrong sized hose for the radiator, connecting from the radiator to the engine. And so what it did is it slightly rubbed up against the fan belt. Normally, not the biggest deal if you're just driving back and forth to school. It can take a little bit of that, right? It's going to take maybe a few months for it to kind of get noticeable, and suddenly the cooling light will come on, or the check engine light will come on or something, and you're good. Just, all right, I'm going to go to the gas station, have them fix it. No big deal, right? Well, because you're driving 22 hours straight, which is what I was doing because I was in a manic state. I didn't stop the whole way to sleep or anything. I just drove it straight through. So like when you're doing that, the engine's heating up, the parts are getting warm, they're getting softer, and so they're kind of sagging a little bit. And so they started sagging into the fan belt more and more, and that's kind of a self-compounding issue. So it's at points along the way, it's not like I could stop and call my parents or anything. And so I would just stop, get out my roll of duct tape and duct tape that sumbitch shut and just keep driving. And of course, duct tape, normal duct tape, not meant to really handle boiling antifreeze. And so it would go like for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and I'd have to stop again, fill up the radiator fluid again, put some more duct tape on it, and keep going. And the car ended up dying just a couple miles away from Disney World. And I know, right? Boo, right? And so I had to suck it up and call my parents. It was a huge deal. I got in a lot of trouble. I got that car. It stayed down in Florida actually for a couple months, getting fixed at a gas station at a local garage. And we went down for spring break to get it. My dad and we flew down, and he said, oh my gosh, that was so horrible. That was a horrible drive because my dad was an abusive person to begin with, and he had a very good reason to be pissed off at me at that point because it had cost, thousands of dollars at that point. But it didn't, the money didn't matter. It was the, I did something that was legitimately something that he could be pissed at me about. And that drive back was, oh my God, it was hell. Whew. Anyway, so that's a tangible example of how things got really affected in my life, right? It was one thing that absolutely screwed me over. But I want to go into some of the things that I missed out on because of depressive episodes or episodes that spiraled inside themselves because of being associated with depression. Now, one of the biggest things is 3 words. And these 3 words that I'm about to tell you they're pervasive. They're right there on both sides of the bipolar depression, both the manic side and the depressive side, but they have very different effects on each side of that line. Those 3 words are, I don't care. Okay? When you're in a manic phase and you're doing something like me going down to Florida, right? And the hose was getting cut into repeatedly to the point where it was damaging the engine and ended up seizing the engine from overheating at one point. I knew what that was going to do. I knew that going down to Florida on a Tuesday in the middle of the winter from Michigan to Florida with the idea of going to Disney, I knew that was stupid. I knew that picking up a couple of hitchhikers along the way, oh boy, you should go find that episode. I knew that was a stupid thing to do. But those 3 words were always in my head. I don't care. You're going to get in trouble with your parents. I don't care. You're going to blow up the car. I don't care. You're in danger picking up these people. I don't care, right? When you get on the depressive side, those 3 words turn into shackles. Those 3 words, I don't care, turn into something that limits you, that wrecks parts of your life, that alienates people from you. It takes things away from you that you wish you had done. And one of the great examples of this is I can't tell you a lot of details about this one. How do I tell this one? I used to be a person that was very heavily involved in Hollywood. And at the same time, my abusive parents really liked to screw with me with it. And so I went and, I would want to go get headshots in order to take to an agent to distribute so I could get auditions. And I'd be all lined up for it. And then I would do something that my parents didn't like. And then they would say, fuck the headshots. You're not going to get those things right now. You're going to have to earn that shit again before we even consider it. And so months and months would go by, or they'd forget about it, or life would go on, and we just, it wasn't possible anymore, or whatever it was. And they would use that repeatedly, right? So I would get an opportunity, and I would, they'd line everything up for me to do it, and then it would be pulled out from under me because of leverage for some reason, right? One of the great examples is I got into Juilliard. Okay. I got into Juilliard, the college for arts, right? And it was for singing. I had to audition and everything. I got into Juilliard, but did they let me go? No, because they figured that I'd done something wrong and they punished me and didn't let me go. Well, one of the things that I was involved in with Hollywood, and I did, voiceover work, post-production work, like just all sorts of stuff. I have a tie to the Hollywood that's pretty significant. Not anymore. It's not like I could call and go, hey, give me a favor. No. But like I had the opportunity to audition for, I'm not telling you what it was for. I can't. I can't. It's too much because it would bring too many people into it. No. I had the opportunity to audition for a big movie. It was a big franchise movie that they needed a new character for. And they had 3 people in mind for this, for the audition. And I can't tell you who. Oh, God, I wish I could tell you the other 2 people because the third person was me. It was basically like they had narrowed down everything and they got to the point where they're like, final auditions. We want you to come back for something like this. And you're going to read this part with the people who are the stars in the movie. We want to see your chemistry. We want to see everything going on. And up until that point, the producers, the casting agents had really, really liked me because I had, maybe still have, I don't know, the look, the quote unquote, the look. And I knew the lines. I had the acting down and everything. It was like, I was seriously being considered alongside these 2 other actors, which if I mention their names, they are household names. Absolutely. Maybe not so much anymore because the dilution of media has made it so no one's really a star anymore. But these 2 other people were big names. And I really had a decent shot of becoming this character. And I mean, it was a big franchise movie. And my parents got pissed. And so they took it away. Right? But the thing was, they wanted me to go at first. They wanted me to get there. They wanted me to get to that point so it was like you can finally be successful and do something with your life. And what happened before I pissed them off that started to turn them away from it, that made it so they could use it as a leverage piece instead because they knew as well that I had a good shot at this. They knew that this could catapult me into being, small time stuff into big time stuff. And that would make them look great because my family was all about reputation. They knew that it was something that I was really going for. And I swung from a manic episode into a depressive episode at the worst time possible because they wanted me to go and get screen tests or something like that done. And it would have really added to it to the point where I probably would have gotten it. But I was in a depressive phase and I said, I don't care. And they said, it'll really improve your chances. They'll probably ask you to stay out there. And that's probably what they would have done. Screen test, they would have put me in a hotel. And then that would have been, everything was out of my parents' hands at that point. It would have been a closed loop system where suddenly I get rolled into it and everything else is my agent takes care of things. And bing, bang, boom, I got myself onto stardom. Well, I was stuck with the I don't care. It was, well, if you don't do this, there's going to be really big repercussions. You probably won't get the part. I don't care. I don't care. Oh, well, you should learn the script real good before you go in there. I don't care. Right? And so it kind of turned them into, well, he's not serious about it, so maybe we can use it as a leverage point. And I ended up doing something stupid and they took it away. But if I had stayed regular on that, not gone from a manic phase into a depressive phase, I don't care wouldn't have kept me from that opportunity. In college, the same thing, right? I would be doing something like going to classes or something, and suddenly I would miss a couple of classes for whatever reason, and then I would slip into that depressive phase, right? Because I'd be going to all my classes, all the manic phase. I'd go out with girlfriends, go to raves, go to frat parties and everything like that, networking, meeting people, getting grades that were awesome, and then I'd, swing into that depressive phase. And it's like, dude, you should go to class today. I don't care, right? Well, there's a test coming up and you're not going to know what's in the test. I don't care. Oh, your girlfriend says she's going to meet you at the party and she really wants to talk because she doesn't think the relationship's going the right way. I don't care. Right? Those 3 words took so much away from my life. And the thing is, when you're in manic phase and you say, I don't care, it can often involve a lot of risk of injury, right? Like, you shouldn't really try parkour when you don't know parkour, but you're just feeling real confident and you think you can make that gap by jumping it. But you say, I don't care. And then you go flying across that and break your ankle or something. And like, it's just reckless, right? But when you're in the depressive phase, I don't care can also lead to a lot of injury, but it can be a lot more psychic injury than other things, right? Because your friends can say, oh, we're going out and we're going to have a great time. I don't care. I don't want to go, right? Or you have the opportunity to meet a new person, to network for a new job, right? And I don't care. I don't care if it'll lead to something better. Right? I really don't care. There were a lot of other auditions and things that I was offered over the years that I didn't care, right? I just don't care. And a lot of, as much blame as I can put on my parents and my aunt and uncle having their little goofy power play back and forth for decades, as much as I can blame some of my lack of being a huge household name on that, I also can take a lot of blame myself because of those three words. I don't care, right? It's just like, you can be big, I don't care, right? This might be your last opportunity, I don't care. It never was the last opportunity, but it was like, I don't care. I really do not give a shit. And the problem is, if they had offered me that opportunity when I was in a manic phase, it just was always bad timing, And the problem was, it would be like it was for that first big audition, right? I would be in a manic phase for months and I'd be like all hot on this. I'd learn all the lines. I'd dress up in the costume to get myself feeling right. And I would get there and like, oh, how you doing, agent? It's real good. Let's crank out a whole bunch of things for the right? And then everything would be going good. And then I'd hit that depressed phase and just, I don't care, right? And so all that work that I did would just go smashing to the ground. One other thing that it did was I was in a lot of musicals over the years, and some of the ones that I was in high school, I would be doing great. One was Bye Bye Birdie. I was Conrad Birdie in Bye Bye Birdie, and I was doing great. Everything was great. I was in like a normal, and then I swung into a manic phase right before we started to do episodes, but before we started to do performances. And I dipped into a depressive phase, and I got really drunk over like several days. And unfortunately, I was drunk on stage for a crowd that was not a crowd that should have seen me drunk on stage. It was a bunch of people from an elementary school in the district, and I still am extremely embarrassed about that because it wasn't what I wanted people to see. And it's something that happened because of that depressive phase. I don't care, right? You can't get drunk and go on stage for all these kids. And it was like, I don't care, man. I just don't care. And it took away, like I said, so much from my life. Now, where do I want to go with this? I want to add in the little modifier that makes my situation a little bit more interesting to deal with, and that is something that I mentioned before about hearing music all the time. Because of the head injury and maybe what other brain chemistry was right on the verge of causing it, the head injury pushed me into a place where I hear music all the time. And when I was a kid, I didn't think it was anything weird, right? You get earworms, right? Everyone gets earworms. I just thought that I was one of those people that gets really bad earworms, except the earworm would last 3 months, right? I would get the same song just pumping through my head all the time. And it was like anytime I wasn't actually listening to music or singing a song on stage or something like that, the same song or different songs would just be always cranking in my head. And it's kind of like if you listen to what I'm talking to, if you've heard all the music under me in this podcast, it ranges from a little bit like that around there to a little bit louder to when I'm stressed out in certain situations. It can be loud enough that it's like being at not like a nightclub necessarily, but almost that bad, right? Where the music is there and it's just so invasive. Anyway, I have something called schizoaffective disorder. Schizoaffective disorder is bipolar plus schizophrenia. And I didn't know anything was wrong with me back then, because again, I thought it was just like I suddenly became very interested in getting into musicals and choirs and playing instruments and things like that. Strangely enough, weird, right? But that's what I thought it was. And so I didn't know it was an issue until way later in my life. Now, let's talk about when I was first diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Like I said, around 13 to 15, somewhere in there. The brain damage that I have fuzzies up a lot of memories from that part in my life. I don't really have a lot at all from that. I don't remember day-to-day stuff. I don't remember events or musicals or plays or anything that I was in. I find pictures occasionally online. I'll find a picture of me in an opera that I was in or something like that. And it's like, suddenly I go, oh yeah, I remember that day, like a little bit, snapshots here and there in my mind of things like that. But so somewhere between 12 and 15, I first got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and it was from the same doctor that I'd been seeing since I was 8 years old. When the school that I was at was like, something is really wrong with Orphoeus. They wrote a letter home that I found years later to my parents that said, something's really wrong with Orphoeus. His latest IQ and psychological batteries, because this was a private school, they had a lot of staff that could do all that stuff. And so I started acting violent, like I told you, all that stuff. I started acting really weird. And so the school put me through a lot of psychological testing, which included a few intelligence tests, IQ tests. And the results apparently scared them so bad that, and the overall results, not just the IQ, that they said was frighteningly high. Those are the words that were in the letter. But it was just like, something is wrong. Right. And so the other results of the test, the psychological portions of the test, were alarming to the point where they told my parents that they need to send me to a therapist and like seriously get me to someone who can help because something's wrong. And so this was the same doctor that I'd been seeing since then. And a lot of new diagnostic stuff came out, I guess, or they changed something, or maybe something clicked for him. And he figured out that I was bipolar. And so they started putting me and this was, I went to see like maybe 3 therapists during the next couple of years or 3 years, because this guy had gotten old. He was starting to fall asleep during our sessions. So how's your life going, Orpheus? And I'd start telling him, I'd start talking for a few minutes, and I'd notice him sitting across the desk, and he'd have his hand on his face, his 2 fingers on his temple and a thumb on his chin, and all of a sudden he'd just kind of just nod off a little bit, and, oh, okay, that's fascinating. Oh, yeah, no, that's great. Oh, everything sounds good, right? So my parents and I decided it's probably not good to go see the guy in his 80s who's falling asleep, right? And so I started going to these other ones, but they put me on so many medications over the years. Let's see if I can remember some. Lithium, Depakote was one over the years that I took several times on and off. Prozac was one. Wellbutrin was one. What were some of the other ones? I don't remember all of them. Effexor, I think, was one. There were a lot that I was on over the years, and almost all of them did some horrible side effects for me. You hear about a lot of the bad side effects from some of these medications, especially ones that are associated with psychological things. And some of them are called SSRIs. They're serotonin reuptake inhibitors or something like that. They just kind of numb you out. They turn you into a zombie. What they do is they don't bring you back to normal levels, right? What they do instead is they just cut the tops and bottoms off of your emotional states. And so you're just kind of stuck in an unfeeling kind of thing in the middle. Nothing really gets you going. Nothing really puts you down, right? And so you're just kind of like going through life just like with just a hum. And that's just your life. There's no variation. There's nothing like that. But all the bad side effects, man, the sexual side effects, the GI, the gastrointestinal system stuff. Oh My God, I went through some awful stuff over the years, and it does some nasty stuff to your sleep patterns and everything. And so I had to go on medications for sleep that were just awful. I'd have one doctor that would, prescribe me stuff, and then the psychiatrist would see that and like prescribe me stuff on top of it. I went on and off the medications because of the side effects, and so it wouldn't be effective. I'd swing in and out of it, and like, oh my gosh. I had doctors that have, over the years, you should see my combined comprehensive diagnosis list. It's like 17 things. And the big thing in there is bipolar, but it also spun off into a bunch of other things like the social psychopathy, Machiavellianism, narcissism. I'm on the dark triad. Let's just put it that way. Very strongly on the dark triad. I've managed to control it. And part of that was the journey of the medicating. It was part of the journey was the medication and the therapy and the psychoanalysis and everything else that I went through over the years. But it didn't really catch very well because there were periods in my life that I've discussed this kind of phenomenon before where I simply label it as life happens, right? And so it would go from a semi-stable situation where I've got a therapist, I've got medication, I've got things pretty much under control, not perfect, right? Because there's always a gap in the medicating regimen. When you're younger, you don't really take it as often as you should. Maybe it doesn't work right, but you don't report things because you're embarrassed that, dick don't work, right? Or something like that, You don't want to go and say, hey, doc, dick don't work. Put me on something different. And so you kind of float through these times where it's okay controlled, but then like I say, life happens, and you stop getting the ability to see the therapist or to stay on the medication. Maybe you don't have insurance for a while because you lost your job, and Cobra is absolutely horribly expensive, and you don't have the ability to keep paying cash for somebody or the medications or something. And so life happens, you kind of dip away from the help and things get worse, things get better, things get way worse. I've lost jobs because of it. I have alienated friends because of it. I've lost apartments because of it. And it comes down to, again, those three words, I don't care. And it's like, if you don't go to your job this week, you're not going to make enough money to pay rent. And if you don't pay rent, you're going to get evicted. I don't care, right? Because I'm stuck in my little depressive thing. And so when you get to those times in your life, and they happened a lot for me, where I just kind of floated around, went from apartment to apartment, state to state, job to job, girlfriend to girlfriend. I was just all over the place in terms of trying to keep resettling and re-establishing a normal life, but it wasn't happening because I'd keep swinging from manic episode to depressive episode over and over again. I'd get an awesome job where I got into it, and I would be the perfect employee, showing up early. I had all the stuff, right? One of the ones was Ford Motor Company. I got a job at one point in their technical support program in what was known as their Spock department. The Spock department was the one where anyone in Ford could call the Spock department and get help with whatever, right? My computer crashed. I can't get my phone to work. My beeper isn't working. You can tell the time of when this happened. And yes, I actually did get the phone calls of my computer's not working. And I'd say, did you turn it on? Oh, okay, thanks. And hang up. I also got the ones of legitimately, I had more than one. I think it was more like 3 or 4 people that used the CD slide out tray as a coffee holder, and it snapped off, and they were mad about it. Because I was working with baby boomers, right, that were trying to integrate computers into their daily workflow, and there was some dumb dummies when it came to that. But I was really into it. I was the perfect Ford employee. I went down to their office, like their gift shop, and I had like the messenger bag that said Ford on it, and the t-shirts and the golf shirts and the jackets and lanyards and all that stuff. And then like I got manic just going. I would burn through calls, and I was great. And then I got depressed, and I smoked a bunch of weed, and I got random drug tested, and I lost it. I lost that job. But it was like, as I'm smoking the weed, it was like, dude, I know I'm going to get tested at some point, because they rolled through those departments with drug tests constantly. It's like, if you didn't get chosen this month, you were going to get chosen in the month or two after that. And it was like, dude, you can't get that in and out of your system in time. I don't care. I feel like shit. I want to smoke some weed, right? And so I lost that job because of that. And that would have led to something pretty good. Honestly, it paid really well. And I was like, how old was I? I was like 22, 23, and I was making really good money for that age. I mean, really good money, more than I did at the first radio job that I got, that's for sure. But so I lost good jobs, and then I met Mrs. Orphoeus, and that kind of thing went on, and I was unmedicated for a large part of that. No therapist, no medication. But Mrs. Orphoeus is such an incredibly grounding person, and it can be very rare to find these people, and even rarer to actually be with someone like that as a companion or a good friend. She's so grounding of me that she is able to stop me from going into a lot of that stuff. At least the harmful portions, right? She can take those 3 words, I don't care, and make it into, I don't give a shit, do it, right? So she can bring me back from a lot of those things. Now, over the years when I wasn't medicated or going to therapy, again, it was those life happens kind of things where we would go from one job to the next, one state to the next, and kind of float around. Didn't always have the constant health insurance, didn't always have constant access to a therapist. Because like when we lived up and worked up on the Navajo reservation, there was no way in hell that I was going to be able to go to a therapist and get medication on a regular basis, especially because the only medical care that was within within 2.5 hours was a hospital and medical center that didn't serve anyone who wasn't Navajo. So even if I had like a gunshot wound, they would probably turn you away. And especially something like I stabbed myself in the foot really bad. What's the episode that I talked about that? How not to do first aid, I think was the episode that I talked about that in. I stabbed myself in the foot really bad. Like I bled a couple quarts, all right, a couple pints or whatever it was. I bled all over the bathroom. I had to stitch it up myself, give myself antibiotics, do all that stuff myself because I was not able to go to the local hospital, the local ER. And you're like, no, that's against the law. Not on the Navajo reservation. That's their own laws. That's their own rules. And they used subsidies from the government to make that hospital. And they can say, nope, you don't get to come in here. It's not the same rules if there's a life-threatening incident where you can walk into an emergency room without insurance and they have to treat you, right? They must treat you. It's against the law for them to not. Well, the Navajo reservation, they don't really do that. And so it wasn't possible for me to get therapy and medication during that chunk of my life. And that's just an example of how things would go, right? So it didn't really get stable until we moved to the city that we're in now. And I finally found, because I was tired of swinging back and forth. I was really tired of it. I wasn't happy. I wasn't productive. I just wasn't feeling good. And I was tired of it. I was tired of a lifetime of swinging back and forth and being out of control and not being able to do anything good with myself. And you know, the bipolar disorder affected my jobs over the years, even in radio, where it was something that I was motivated by and that I loved. You know, my personality would go from endearing and wonderful and funny to suddenly going a couple months of me just being Mr. DJ, right? Just, oh, here's one more by Hootie and the Blowfish. We'll be right back after this, right? Not the, hey, 94.7 WXRK-FM, it's Orpheus here. You know, like I would just not care about doing the best job that I could. And so that also affected things over the years. So I was tired of it. I was tired of not being the best version of myself that I could be. And so finally I sucked it up and I went to see somebody. And I was so fortunate because this was the first person that I reached out for. And I don't even remember how I found her. I think I just did a Google search or something like that. And it was, this person popped up. I went over to them. I spent like 2 hours in the first session with this person, just talking about life and the challenges and some of the things that I've gone through and some of the diagnoses that I've had over the years. And we started to design a program that was absolutely exceptional. I'm on something called Lamictal right now, or lamotrigine, and it's what's known as a mood stabilizer. It's not something like Prozac. It's not an SSRI. It's not something that affects your brain chemistry the same way. It's a mood stabilizer that has very low side effects with it, and it is something that has... The way that I described it to my therapist after, it started to really kick in and work, like noticeably work, was it's refreshing to be able to, and the metaphor I gave was standing on a little island in the middle of the ocean, and the ocean is depression, right? And before, it was just a little plank that I could crawl up onto and not drown. It was just kind of like oh my gosh, my head's above water. I'm doing okay. I'm okay. But then I'd slip off the plank and back into the water and depressed, right? It was great. It is great for me now to be able to stand on a little island in the middle of that ocean and dip my toes in occasionally. Right? If something situational happens, I dip my toes into that ocean and feel a little bit depressed for a while. The amount that seems appropriate for something situational, right? It's like being able to experience depression because I lost a phone that I really like, or that someone died that I really was good friends with, or something like that. It's good to be able to feel the appropriate depressive state that comes with something like that, instead of it spiraling into something that is uncontrollable and lasts for months, or waking up one day and not understanding why suddenly the world absolutely fucking sucks, and again being stuck in it for months. So the idea, the ability for me to get on the correct medication for things, the ability to get a full correct prescription regimen for the things that were going on in my life, all it took was the ability for me to suck it up and stop with the I don't care, and finally come and realize and admit to myself, and not just to myself, admit to my wife that I'm tired of this. I'm tired of feeling chaos all the time. I'm tired of being up and down, left and right all the time. And you have to get to the point where some of your pride has to be set aside. You have to set aside some of that fear, some of that anxiety, what's the I can't come up with the word. You just don't feel like you should, the hesitancy. You don't want to go because you don't want to give up that vulnerable part of yourself to someone who's a stranger that you're paying. Well, the thing is, when you're paying someone to listen to you, they listen to you. And when it's their job to listen to you and respond with appropriate treatment, right? They're going to do the job that they can that's best. And, it might take you a while to find someone. Again, I was extremely fortunate to find someone first shot that was understanding and caring and compassionate and, a good person, a genuinely good person. It can be a life-changing thing when you find the right regimen. So for me, part of it was I have very severe PTSD, anxiety disorder, and a bunch of other things. The PTSD started when it was anywhere from 3 to 5 years old, somewhere in there. Again, I'm not going to go into the specifics. I witnessed something that was bad, really, really bad. I don't even like thinking about it. I witnessed something that was really bad, and it gave me lifetime PTSD. And so night terrors were something that I dealt with my entire life because of it. And talking about that, and for the first time actually talking about that situation, that event, talking about everything that happened with that person, and explaining to the therapist that it was something that affected other parts in my life severely, like sleep, again, the medication regimen was able to add something called prazosin, which is a medication that it stops the tape from recording while you're sleeping, right? So it's not like you don't dream. You don't go insane because your cleaning mechanisms don't happen from REM sleep. You just don't, your brain doesn't respond to it while you're sleeping, and you don't remember it after you wake up, right? So I can have all the bad dreams I want when I'm on the prazosin. I don't remember them, and my body doesn't react to them, because when you're sleeping, your brain has difficulty determining what is real and what is a memory, and what is and what is fake. What is made up, and unless it's something absurd where you're, lucid dreaming and you're controlling things, your brain has a little bit of difficulty separating between reality and fantasy. And so you involve yourself in that dream and you remember it afterwards, but you also probably are experiencing it in the moment. I don't. For the most part, I don't have dreams anymore. I don't remember them. I don't have them. When I have other ones, when I go take a nap or something, I do have some vivid dreams. I do have the same dreams, but they're not of that event, and they're not disrupted to the point where they keep me from sleeping or feeling comfortable with life. But again, that was another medication that was added on in order to take care of something that I didn't get help for before, right? So where am I going with all this? I think what I hope that I've done here is give you an idea of, if you are someone that deals with these things, or you see someone in your life that deals with these things, I hope that I give you a little bit more clear of a definition of not only what it is, but what to look for, and some tangible examples of what it does to your life, right? It keeps you from going on dates. It keeps you from being able to take care of your hobbies. It keeps you from continuing hobbies, right? If you get into a depressive episode that gets tied to a hobby that you have, that you've developed or whatever, and you get very depressed about something that's connected to that, you won't want to do that hobby anymore. So you'll put away all the stuff that you got for that hobby, and you'll never touch it again. And every time you look at it, you open a closet and you see it sitting there like climbing gear or whatever, and you got it in the closet, and every time you open the closet, you see that climbing gear and you go, right? And you just lose all the flair with things. It takes away so many things. And I hope I gave you an idea of what that can be like if you're not someone that deals with that on a regular basis. Bipolar disorder is an absolutely crippling disease, and it's not something, let's be honest here, it is not something that you can handle by yourself. It is not something that you can self-regulate. And one of the problems that people do with that is they try to self-medicate. Marijuana is used a lot for this, but also a lot of pills are used for it. People will use Adderall or Ritalin to try to push themselves out of a depressive phase, and they'll use things like marijuana or alcohol. Marijuana works both ways, sativa, indica, hybrid, whatever. But they'll use the marijuana sativa strains to get themselves out of depression, or, again, like speed or whatever, ecstasy, to get themselves out of the depression. And then when they're manic and they're feeling too much, they'll use substances like alcohol or depressive pills like Vicodin or Xanax or something like that to chill out. And so you get this like Elvis effect where you're constantly self-medicating to try to bring yourself back to the normal, because you want to feel that normal, right? But you also want to escape from those highs and lows. So what you're doing by trying to escape is what you're really trying to do is pull yourself out of that portion of your life that feels out of control. But what you're really doing with that medication is you're trying to apply a temporary fix to something that is not a temporary situation. So if you're a normal person and something situational happens to you where you're feeling depressed, your best friend dies, for instance, and you go out and you get shit-faced drunk that night, it's not something that you're going to do for 6 months, get shit-faced every night to deal with it if you're a normal person. It's something that you're going to do as a coping mechanism for a little bit, maybe a day or 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and you're going to push your way and work your way through that as a normal person. I'm not saying go use substances to tolerate. Whatever it is that you use to deal with it, right? Those behaviors become more extreme and more harmful when you get into the self-medicating and to where you're out of control with your bipolar. So if you're someone that deals with that on a regular basis, please go get some help. Like I said in the beginning of this, I'm not a therapist or anything like that. I just know that it is more important to get help when you get something like this and deal with it, or if you even think you're dealing with it. Maybe you just feel like, maybe I don't have bipolar. I don't know. Should I go talk to a therapist? Yes, go talk to him, because this is not something you're going to be able to handle yourself. Have the little bit of decency to yourself, and have the self-care and self-love to realize that you might have an issue. And it is an issue that you will not be able to solve by yourself. It is also not an issue that you will be able to get through by talking to your friends or your family. This is something that you must go to someone who is impartial. You must go to someone who is not invested in your life day to day. This is something that I dealt with growing up, being Machiavellianist and narcissist. I would try to give therapy to people. If there was a girl that was having trouble in high school and she was having trouble with her boyfriend and everything, but I secretly thought she was hot, right? I would give her therapy, but I was skewed towards, no, if he's not being good to you, you should look for someone that's kind and considerate who listens to you, wink, wink, right? But it was like my own desires or something that I desired to see behavior from that person skewed the way that I would talk to them. Get away from that. Get away from someone that's going to be like, if they tell me about all this stuff and they're depressed, maybe they won't take me to the concert on Friday. So I'm going to tell them that they're doing fine. Don't talk to someone like that. Talk to someone who is a third party, impartial, whose job it is to help you. Okay, whose job it is to try to find a solution to help you become more normal. I'm not going to stigmatize the word normal. Yes, there is a normal in this world. There still is normal in this crazy, diverse, messed up, neurodivergent world. There is a normal. Normal means you can live day to day without your mental issues causing you pain, causing you suffering, causing you consequence instead of result. Okay? You get to the point in your life where you don't have to think about it all the time, where you're not like, God, I hope I don't go into a manic phase before whatever happens, right? God, I hope I don't get depressed before I have to go on this trip, on this cruise that I've been looking forward to for 6 months. Because if you dip into that depressive phase, you won't be able to control it. If you don't have the therapy and the medication and everything else, you won't be able to control it. And that cruise suddenly becomes $3,000 or $5,000 that you wasted because you sat in your cabin the whole time drinking from your mini bar and just watching the TV, watching fucking, Netflix on the TV instead of standing on the deck of a cruise ship playing shuffleboard and enjoying the sun. Because those 3 words, I don't care. You spent $3,000 in this, I don't care. Stay away from that. Be able to see yourself for what you have going on and get to someone who can help. There are free resources. There are low-cost resources. There are telehealth resources. Don't go to something like BetterHelp or Better Health or whatever it's called. Don't go to one of those pay per thing that you see advertised on a YouTube video. If there's a commercial on this podcast and it's for BetterHelp or whatever that thing is called, don't go there. Do not use that service. Use a telehealth system that is attached to an insurance company or something like that. Use resources that are free but also proven to work for people. Get on some medication. Talk to people about your problems. Even if you have to talk to just a nurse practitioner or the person that you have as your healthcare provider, tell them about what's going on, because they can help monitor the medication and the results, if nothing else, because the medication being correct is a huge part of the equation. You can't do it yourself. You're going to need some help. So go find it, because if you can learn anything from my experience, it is that your life path can be incredibly chaotic, to the point where you don't get shit figured out until you're in your 40s. Okay? Where you don't get your life figured out until you're 40 something and you're like, what the fuck have I been doing with my life? I need to change something, right? Don't get to the point where you're forced with that choice because you get sick of it. make that choice before you start making all of those damaging decisions and before you use those 3 words. I don't care. Anyway, that's my thing for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a chance to learn from it, because it is a serious problem that a lot of people face these days. And I think it's something that more people could find some help with, because you're going to find a lot of people out there who are overstimulated with life. And when you take the overstimulated environment that we live in, it can really make things worse if you're a bipolar sufferer, because the constant flow of information, the constant doom scrolling, the constant endorphin rushes and depressive episodes that you get from scrolling through X or something like that, and you're seeing funny cat videos, and then you dip to seeing someone getting horribly killed or mutilated or something a couple posts down because that's what's on the feed, that was recommended, whatever it is. You can fly too much into those things and they can push you further into them. So make sure that you get some help. Anyway, we'll see you next time here on Orpheus Plays. Be good, do good, and especially treat yourself well, because you deserve that. Okay, see you next time. Bye.